Kevin Gordon here from Autosavant.com with your January 25th edition of the Afternoon Commute. Coming to you again from the long-term test EcoBoost Ford F-150 until next week. You'll notice that the scenery looks pretty similar to the other days. My actual commute home from my day job. Today we've got 4 things to talk through, starting with the fact that the news about the Chevrolet Volt is on fire today. All the puns intended. Come back for more bad jokes tomorrow. In all seriousness, the GM CEO, Dan Akerson, had to go testify in front of a Senate subcommittee today regarding the safety issues around the Chevrolet Volt. And the National Safety Commission that did the initial investigation, they took almost 6 months to come back with their finding. And all of this, for those of you who don't know, and to be honest with you, I hadn't even read into it until today, have to do with a Volt that was crash tested and multiple months later then caught on fire. So, GM CEO sat in front of them, said, no, the Volt's very safe, despite what anybody would like to say about it, that the conditions in which it caught on fire would never happen to a common person. And he had a pretty good sort of jab in there, which is, he said to the Senate subcommittee, I believe, he said, the one thing we didn't engineer the Volt to be is a punching bag, and that's ultimately what it's become. So I have to give him credit for standing up. Not to get too far into politics today, because I got my hand slapped for talking about taxing the rich the other day. But, it's a Republican committee who seems a little upset with the Obama administration for putting all these tax breaks in place in order to push this stuff through. And then, of course, supposedly influencing GM, which took bailout money to sort of turn a blind eye to something that might put a black eye on the Volt. Whatever, the fact check there is the fact that actually the Volt tax credit was in place before Obama came into place. And that'll be the end of my political discussion for today. Next up in the news, Ford is supposedly going to be changing their slogan, and this is being reported by Automotive News, from Drive One, which they were using during, the sort of to bring people back from the downtimes of Ford and talk through, to try to convince people to come back and take a look at their cars. They're much better quality, so on and so forth. Their new slogan is going to be to drive further with a U, which is a fine slogan, I suppose. It's going to allow them to consolidate a tagline / slogan down into one for the entire world, because they were using a different one in Europe. I did think it was interesting that it's further with a U instead of farther. Farther being a measure of distance, where further is a little bit, less direct and definable, but I suppose that might be what they're going for. Third up for today, the fact that the Dodge Avenger may be phased out of production in order so the Chrysler Dodge network of corporate and dealers and marketing can focus more on the 200 and the upcoming Dodge Dart, which will be underpinned by Fiat infrastructure at some point. So look for that announcement to come out sometime later this year officially. Makes sense to me. I mean, the Avenger did sell 60-some thousand models last year, up from the year before, as almost everything was in the automotive industry, but still it lags significantly behind the Camry, the Accord, the Altima, the Fusion, pretty much everything that's competitive in its class. So look for them to drop the Avenger and focus on the 200 and the Dart as they move forward. And finally for today, Jeep released pictures of a concept, and I do air quotes for concept because it really doesn't look like a concept at all, but a new edition of the Jeep Grand Cherokee that is completely blacked out, or as I believe the kids say today, murdered out. Sorry, murdered out. And it didn't come with a name because they are going to let the public decide its name. So I think there's some kind of Facebook something or some sort of social media way that you can go in and propose names, and then they'll be voting. And of course, most of the names will surround, derivatives of the word black or night or stealth or something. I would take a slightly different approach, which is try to vote up a completely horrible name like the Engelbert Humperdinck edition of the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and see if they'll actually go through on their promises to name it whatever the public votes it to be. I'm sure that, there's a filtering process in there to keep something like that from happening, but nevertheless, I'd try to have more fun with it than whatever bland thing that eventually it does get named to be winds up being. So there's your January 25th edition of the Afternoon Commute. I'm Kevin Gordon from Autosavant.com, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow.